Well, hey everybody, welcome to When We Walk. I'm Micah.
I'm Shireen.
And this is a little podcast that consists of us sitting on a couch talking about what happens when we walk.
Which a lot of things happen. One of the things I've thought about is when we take walks, and this is maybe a little inspiration for people who want to take walks.
Okay.
If you're not a walker. I thought when we started doing this, I mean, we've been doing, this was pre-pandemic when everyone started walking. You remember that? When we started seeing everyone walking, we're like, oh.
Pandemic is when everyone started walking.
Everyone
so we
started
were like walking before walking
We
was
were
cool.
walking before walking was a thing.
Right.
But we would walk our neighborhood, and I've over the years we've done this now, I've realized, like, I feel like we've gotten to know our neighborhood. We've gotten to see our neighbors, like, as they've had babies and watching their babies grow up. And like, because we're such a culture of moving on to the next thing so quick. So I know even for us, we come home, you know, do something with the kids, on to the next thing, take them to the next thing. And you just don't slow down to maybe see and hang out with neighbors as much.
Yeah.
And so for us, what I've loved about taking walks, especially in our neighborhood, is we've gotten to just know our neighborhood, know our neighbors, and like we'll see some of the same people, and they're oh, there y'all are on your evening walk.
Our routine.
They know our routine now, and they'll even say, "I haven't
seen y'all in a little while."
They will. They'll say that. Someone even said to me, because I've had to walk by myself with you recovering. They're like, "Oh, what happened? Where's
really?
Micah?" Oh, wow. And so it was neat. Well, like one person I got to tell the story to, and so it's just kind of fun how you get to know your neighborhood. I think that's like a great thing for all of us to do.
A somewhat isolated world a little bit more connected.
So that's a little encouragement for all of you to take a neighborhood walk.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's nice. So humility. Let's talk about humility and pride and things like that today. So
what spurred that on?
Well, I think it was just flipping through life one day, like just kind of flipping through the internet one day, flipping through social media, whatever. It was a combination of things that I saw, and I can't even remember what they specifically were, but I just remember kind of having this revelation. And for many people, this won't be a revelation. Maybe it's common sense, but it just hit me in a different way that like humility is not a cultural value any longer.
Okay.
I think it's just
I'd agree.
It's just not something I think put a lot of stock in any longer. It's not that we don't have the same value system around it, I think, as we used to. We know that it used to be a value because at least people would try to be humble and fake it in order to seem honest or win trust. And now it's almost the opposite.
Okay.
It's like it feels as though you can't display humility. It's like a sign of weakness almost.
Yes.
And so you see this. I mean, obviously in sports, you can't really be a competitor if you just, you got to have some swagger on the court, on the field. And
you
that's
see
different.
that everywhere.
Yeah, plenty of athletes maybe are humble off the court, but on the court, you definitely see the swagger on the field, all of that. Because it's competition, right?
Right.
And that's normal. I'm not like moralizing it in that
And it
setting.
shows confidence, right?
Yeah, it
like
does.
I've got confidence in my skills or who I am or what I bring to the table.
Yeah. Yep. But you think then translate that like into politics. And that's one of the places you most see it. Like nobody can admit where they're wrong. Like the whole, how you have to blame the other party or your opponent. It's such a high level of competition. Politics has almost become like what we see on the football field, just in the House and the Senate.
Gosh.
It just feels like you can't ever admit a mistake. You can't ever say you're sorry. You have to blame shift in some ways. And then you get into other aspects of our society. You get into entertainment, you get into music industry, all of that. And it's humility is not what you put out there.
It's not valued.
No, it's not. Social media, and just the average user, like we don't like create a profile that would reflect poorly on us. We put our best stuff out there.
Yeah, we get to decide what we're putting out to the world, of course.
Yeah, and so I think it feels to me almost like, because it's just not something we value any longer, it's been lost in a lot of ways. I don't know that we've like chosen against it. I think it's just kind of like deteriorated.
Yep.
And as it's deteriorated as a value in society or as a norm in society, it feels as though like that starts to translate into relationships.
Yeah.
That in many of our relationships, because we don't see this modeled kind of in the world that we live in, I think it hinders our relationships because humility is so important for a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
But if that's just never being modeled, if it's never really put on display, I think we're missing out on a lot of things, and I think it hinders the way we live day to day.
It totally does. I think I wonder if one of the harder parts about it is like, okay, so the first thing I always think about when I think of humility, right? We think it is something we want to value. We want to be humble people, whether it's, and I know that there's like this whole false humility, right? We can put on a air of humility, but it can still just be the other side of the pride coin. But I think when I think of humility, I think of like, no one wants to be like humiliated,
No way.
right?
No way.
So like, you don't want to, no one wants that. And so that's almost what it feels like. Like you don't want that. No one wants that feeling. Like I remember thinking, you and I talked about this of like, when we would tell our most embarrassing moments, I hated that. I hate that feeling of having to relive that embarrassing moment. It's humiliating. And I don't want to tell anyone.
Even when you're past it?
Yes. Okay. I still don't want to talk about it. Yeah. Maybe that's a personality issue I have. I don't know.
That's interesting.
But I think that's a human thing though, right? Like we don't want to live in this place. We feel like it's humiliating. It's embarrassing. It feels, it feels like it puts you in this place that is, I don't know, like you're looked down upon by others.
And so it's vulnerability.
It's vulnerability, really. But I think that is why most people think of it that way. I mean, that's me. That's my internal thinking sometimes of like, I don't like that feeling. So you'd almost rather put on this air of confidence or whatever, whether it's false or whether it's actual like pride and confidence. I don't know. But I think you're right that it does hinder relationship. I mean, if it is vulnerability, then you're not being completely honest and real and humble in the place of, able to say you're sorry or able to admit when you are wrong. I think that I agree. It's not a value that we see in society. I definitely think, I know we talked about this, you and I have talked about it a lot, is when it's out there and we see it and it's what we see flipping through our phones, on all social media, on the news, it's in sports, it's displayed, and everyone who we kind of, I don't know, prop up, they are like the people we look to, then we're not going to value it either, right? If we don't see it valued by the people around us. And so I think it does make it hard because you actually do need it in real relationship. Like you need it in marriage. We need it in marriage, turns out. Yeah. And you have to be, for marriage to last, you have to be humble. Like there's no way marriages will make it if you don't come with a level of humility. Yeah. And so in all relationship, yet for some reason displayed for all of us in levels of leadership or sports or whatever, it is not valued. I don't know why that is. Yeah. Because in real relationship, you need it.
One of the things that maybe has contributed to it, and this is not studied and researched, but just little things I've picked up on and read is I think as our world, especially in the last four years, has become increasingly more justice focused, really focused on rights. We think it's kind of like the Beastie Boys, right? Like you have to fight for your right. And so it's
we totally just like aged ourselves right now.
Great song.
If you don't know who the Beastie Boys is,
check
go look
it
them
out.
up.
Fight for your right to party. So I do think there has been an emphasis on kind of activism, like stand up.
Oh, for sure.
Like don't be afraid to question, don't be afraid to challenge, which can in many ways be a really good thing.
Right. We do need that.
But I think if we as with so many things in life, it has to do with living more in attention. And I think our culture has like left in an effort to kind of be strong, be courageous, be bold, be loud, speak what's on your mind, say how you feel, be who you are, all of that. We've left behind the reality of, but humility, like what happened to that?
Yeah.
What happened to humbling yourself before others? What happened to serving? What happened to preferring others above yourself? What happened to...
Which is what like we teach our kids, right? We have to make it in our family. But for some reason, it's not displayed out there for everyone to see. Yeah. I don't know why that is, because you do need it in everyday life. And I think for me, the difference, I guess that's why I took it to that whole extreme of like, no one wants to be humiliated, but a posture of being humble is totally different. And I think that's what maybe some people have a problem with. Yeah. Maybe of like, there's a difference with being embarrassed or humbled by something versus, no, I have a heart and a posture of humility. Yeah. You think that could be it?
Yeah, I think it's part of it. I think we, so you could say, what makes humility so hard, right? Why is it hard to be humble in front of, not just in the world, but within relationship? I think one of the things, it's good old fashioned pride, it's ego, right? It's just a tendency. One way you could say it is just, it's such a focus on ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
Just as humans, we spend so much time focusing on ourselves, which then I think breeds in us humility, and a lack of humility. And it's almost like we don't even recognize what we're missing because we're just so focused on ourselves.
But our culture has caused us to go even further this way.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's all what social media is. Yeah. It's me putting myself out into the world. Yeah. Right? Of like, and I get to pick and choose what I'm putting out into the world so I can keep what I don't want anyone to see. Yeah. You can curate. And that's okay, right? There's a level of that's okay. But then if you're not still trying to find ways to cultivate that real relationship, which takes humility in your real life, like, then where are you doing that? Yeah. It's not modeled anywhere that we're looking, even for our kids, right? We're watching our kids, but yet we're having to teach them, no, you have to humbly go to your sibling and apologize for what you did. Yeah. But if we're not seeing it even basic. Modeled by the people we look to in life, right, then, it has to be modeled somewhere,
Yeah, you're right. And I think we, thinking about it from a relational standpoint, if you, all the things we actually want in a relationship, when you think about trust, like it's good to have trust, right? Right. Like it's good to have like approachability, like you don't want to be scared of each other. It's good to have the ability to own your mistakes and seek forgiveness. So many of the things that we actually want and even need in a relationship for there to be a bond, like the only way for them to come is through humility. That's right? So true. Like it's the only path there is for so many of those things. It's kind of like when you're dating, you can impress anybody for a little while, right? When you're dating. But the more you and this is just the marital context, but once you get married, like the real you comes to the surface. And if there's not genuine humility, if you were just kind of serving her because, you're hoping to get a kiss at the end of the night or whatever, like as you get married, like that fizzles and kind of the real you comes to the surface. I think it's true though in friendships. I think it's true with coworkers. We can be polite, on the front end. We can be kind on the front end, but in order to really bond with people and connect with people, I think humility is required to do that. So what we actually want in relationships comes through humility, but humility is the very thing we struggle to do.
Yeah. So I know this to be true in our life.
Yes, absolutely.
I very much struggle with this.
Yeah, I do too.
Not near as much as I do. I don't know if it's like an Enneagram 1 thing, whether you agree with the Enneagram or not. I'm an Enneagram 1. I'm like high achiever, all the things.
Yes, you
right?
are, very much.
I like to be right.
You do. It
I
feels
do.
very good to you. Yes.
It not in a boastful way, but like in a like I don't. Well, maybe I don't know. But like, so when I've messed up, that is hard for me to accept just internally. But then also even harder to come and say, "Hey, I've messed up," and it is talk about like a huge step to take. It really is. So actually walking out humility is hard. I mean, it's hard. Let's
really
just be
is.
honest.
Yeah. And my struggle is almost on the other side of that where you like are so mostly convinced that you're right unless you're proven wrong. I usually am pretty sure I'm probably wrong. And if I turn out to be right, I'm like, oh, it was great. Like I got that one right, which is, we've talked about this, was actually both are forms of pride, right? It's just
a focus on different sides.
It's a focus on ourselves. One is thinking too maybe highly, and the other is thinking too lowly of ourselves.
It's just thinking of yourself
too much all the time. Yep. Yeah. And so C.S.
So we
Lewis,
both do it.
Yeah.
Just
right.
in different ways.
And plenty of times I don't make it out as though I never think I'm right. I mean, we've plenty of times I think I'm right also.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, but I just know what it feels like to be on that other side of that. So the C.S. Lewis quote that we have talked about before, that humility is not, do you remember exactly how it said?
It's not thinking of yourself too much. I don't remember.
Gosh. I think it's C.S. Lewis said humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking
of yourself less. That's what it is. That's so good.
So I think that to me is the essence of how to get through this is because ultimately it's about kind of just, Timothy Keller wrote a great book, The Gift of Self-Forgetfulness.
Yeah, you were talking about that.
Yeah, The Gift of Self-Forgetfulness. It's really kind of based off of that C.S. Lewis quote, and the idea there is it actually is a gift to get to a place where you think of yourself less, where you think of yourself less often, because there's freedom in that. There's joy in that. There's so many of the things I think mentally that we struggle with, and just on a day-to-day basis, a lot of our fears, a lot of our anxieties, a lot of our frustrations, a lot of our irritations have to do because of us thinking of ourselves too often. Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. And
I mean, that's what we try to work out for our kids, right? And trying to help them focus on others first.
Yeah.
Because then it does take the focus off yourself, and it is a natural way to practice humility. But then I think, that's why marriage is so great for us in ways that talk about rubbing those sharp edges, right? Like forces us into this place of practicing serving and being humble and, admitting when we're wrong. It really is like a great way. Turns out God designed it that way. He was very smart in doing that so that we could become more like Christ. It is this intimate relationship that we have to learn to work these things out in that way. And then even before marriage, there's so many other relationships, or whether you even get married or not, there's so many relationships. If you enter in with this desire to be honest and vulnerable and intimate in other ways, to have to work this out and wrestle this out and practice humility, right?
Yep. And Jesus is the best picture of this.
Obviously.
He turned the tide, and people even historians talk about the fact that like humility wasn't a value in Jesus's day, and yet he flipped the script on that. And after him, there was the rise of this thing they call servant leadership. Like it's so true. He pioneered that concept. And not just in organizational leadership of leading people, but also in relational care. He sets the standard for what humility truly is, and
which is so opposite of what we see in the world, and modeled for us. And so the way that potentially even leaders in the church, right? Positions that we even have, or others, in just even Christians, we can totally lead different in this way.
We should.
We should. Yeah. And it can look completely different. This is one way to look so opposite of the world.
But I would even say, even thinking about at the very beginning of this conversation, listing off, sports and politics and entertainment, unfortunately, like, you don't see a lot of humility in the church either, which is crazy.
I know.
Like
we've talked about this.
It feels like it's, this constant need to be the loudest and be the most attractive and the one that everyone's looking to and all of that. And, I'm not, it's just, I'm not here to critique pastors and churches, but I don't know that we always see humility on display from a general standpoint. And I think the world is watching, and if those of us who follow Jesus aren't really living lives that look any different than the rest of the world in terms of how we posture ourselves, then we're kind of doing a big disservice to who Jesus is.
I think so.
As we represent him.
I think so. I think that is a huge way we can look different from the rest of the world. The church can and should, and other Christians, especially in relationship. So then, what are tools?
I was going to ask you because your thing is like,
I need something to do. I have to achieve. So what are you going to tell me to do? What do you do? I thought you had the answers for this one. Well, I think.
Can I say one thing you do as the person who's on the other side of our relationship? You are so good about, you weren't always this way, but over the last 20 years, you have been so good about when I bring this is bothering me, instead of defending yourself.
Which I did.
You did early on.
Yes.
And you've been great at, it's helped me. You've been great at, all right, tell me more. Like, how does it make you feel? Or what could I do differently? Or instead of getting in defensive posture, getting into curious posture, which is a huge sign of humility, I think. So often when it comes to relational conflict, we want to defend rather than get curious. And I think instead of like a simple way, or very practical, you're looking at practical, you do it instead of making statements, ask questions.
Yeah, that's good.
In the face of conflict, which is total countercultural.
Well, it's what you learned early on. Help me understand. That's always a great approach, and that is a kind of a humble way to enter in. I know that has helped me a ton because I want to enter in with, I know I might, I don't even want to say the word might. I know I'm right. Or at least I think I know I'm right. And instead coming in with, help me understand what this situation, what's going on, or, why you said that, or how I hurt you, or whatever, in those situations. I think that is a very humble approach to take. I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think maybe another thing that can help people that are more maybe wired like me, which is always think you're wrong, then when you do feel something in a relationship, you don't bring it up, maybe because it's taken me a long time to learn how to bring things up to you, and do I?
Right.
Because you can just assume, well, I shouldn't feel this way, so it's more of a me problem, and I need to just deal with it.
Yeah.
Again, that's focus on self,
right.
And I think let me just be the solution to my own problem. I think this might not sound like humility, but it actually is for some, depending on how you're wired, to actually say, hey, that hurt. Right. Or, hey, I didn't like this, or, hey, I've been bothered by whatever. You actually bring what you're feeling into the relationship so that it can be worked on together instead of, again, just focusing on me and saying, I'm just going to kind of figure this out on my own, and I don't want to kind of expose myself by kind of showing a weakness or showing a hurt or a pain or something like that.
I think those are good things for sure in relationship. I think I don't want to make this feel like it's too uber spiritual, but honestly, just spending time with Jesus and in prayer, and not even just this is if it is a self-focused thing, when we go to the Lord, we're refocusing on him, right? So we're shifting our focus back to, who do you say that I am? Who are you? Because I want to anchor there first. And then when a situation happens, that is where my anchor is, not in that I messed up. I know I have to do that a lot of times. But then I think another thing that I've noticed that helps breed and cultivate humility is just praying for other people. I think intercessory prayer really helps that. It grows your heart for something outside of you. I think mission
shifts the dynamics of the relationship.
Totally does. I've noticed since I've kind of like started this more prayer circles, like praying for people more often when I spend time with the Lord personally and walk through things that are going on in my heart. But then when I shift to praying for other people, there is a literal heart shift that I just think it's so, it's beyond this realm that we know God does and can cultivate, I think can cultivate humility in a different way.
Yeah.
That is really important.
Yeah, it's always wise.
I don't know. I hope that doesn't sound too uber spiritual, but
prayer,
it's true.
Scripture are always great places to go. Scripture wise, I remember somebody teaching me this probably in my early 20s, and it really speaks to our tendency to think too little of ourselves or too much of ourselves, both versions of pride.
Right.
And thinking of ourselves less often kind of gets us into the place of humility, is the John 15, Philippians 4 reality. It's John 15, where Jesus says to his disciples, apart from me, you can do nothing.
Yep.
So don't think too highly of yourself.
Yep.
But then Philippians 4, in Christ, I can do all things.
All things, yes.
And the focus of both of those passages is not us, it's him. It's getting our focus off ourselves and onto what he can do through us and who we are in him. And when we are settled in that place, I mean, so many things go back to identity, right? Like when we're settled in who we are in Jesus, it frees us up to kind of pick our eyes up and look at the world around us instead of just being zoned in on ourselves. Yeah,
I think that's so true. That's good. I hope that's helpful for people.
Yeah.
We talk about this obviously a lot too.
And I think too, like in any relationship, I mean, pride is always going to be in the mix because we're human beings.
Right.
But I think the more we're intentional about moving into an attitude of humility, it'll kind of ebb and flow, right? And you'll feel like, man, we're at peace and things are really good and there's a lot of bonding and trust and connection, and then pride will sneak in, mostly unexpected things, something that pierces your ego or whatever, and you want to defend yourself and you want to justify and all that. But I think if you stick with it and do some of these basic things, be curious, pray, situate yourself in the heart of God.
Yeah.
Then as you do those things, I think humility can grow in the relationship. And over time, it really does produce in the relationship the things that you want.
I know.
The trust, the love, the connection, the bonding, all the things that you hope to have.
And it'll look completely different from what we see in the rest of the world.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll look different, and that'll be beautiful to the world who is watching.
Yep. That's good.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful for people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's good. Okay.
Okay, so if we want to go back to what are the things
what are we
doing
into
right now? What are we into? What are we listening to? Podcast wise. Besides our own.
Yes. Right now for me, Theology in the Raw. It's the best. Preston Sprinkle. It's so good. We talk about that a lot.
We talk about that podcast a ton. We both listen to that one. I also really love the Bible Project.
Yeah. Can't go wrong with that.
I love learning, turns out. But I also really have enjoyed lately The Office Ladies.
Yes, you've talked a lot about that.
Thanks to one of our camera people in this room right now who...
He's the man.
Brought that to us, our attention.
I haven't listened to it yet. I don't know.
It's great because we're watching The Office right now. And they kind of break down some of the episodes, and you get like little behind the scene nuggets.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of stuff.
That's good. Okay.
So
I should try it. I need less learning in my life.
You need some fun. Some laughter.
That's great.
Maybe that's why we like The Office right now too.
Yes.
We just need some laughter.
We need to laugh at the end of the day. Okay.
That's what we're listening to. If anyone needs some new podcasts besides this one,
check it
listen
out.
to.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. This is always a lot of fun for us. Hopefully it's helpful to you as well. We will be with you next time on When We Walk.